The sharp rip of paper echoed sharper than any jet engine outside the terminal windows. In one vicious motion, my stepdaughter Vanessa snatched my passport from my hand and tore it cleanly in half right there in the check-in line. "You're not going to Hawaii, Maggie," she said with a smug little smile, her voice carrying just far enough for the family behind us to hear. "You're staying home to watch my 2 cats. Someone has to." I stood frozen, 64 years old, surrounded by excited travelers and rolling suitcases, while the boarding passes for the entire family vanished into her designer tote. My daughter Emily wouldn't meet my eyes. Her husband, Derek, Vanessa's trophy of a spouse, let out a low chuckle and patted my shoulder like I was a confused pet. "Come on, it's for the best. You'd slow us down anyway." The terminal smelled of overpriced coffee and cleaning solution. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I could feel the weight of curious stares from strangers who were suddenly very interested in our little family drama. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply adjusted the strap of my leather planner on my shoulder, the one I'd carried for 30 years through boardrooms and budget reviews, and let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. My name is Margaret Thompson. Most people call me Maggie. For 7 years since my husband Richard passed, I've been the quiet foundation holding this blended family together. I paid for the down payment on the house Vanessa and Derek live in. I covered Emily's wedding when money was tight. I funded private school for the grandchildren, car repairs, emergencies, and more vacations than I can count, all while they treated my generosity like an ATM with a pulse. This Hawaii trip was supposed to be different. I had planned it for months, my retirement gift to myself, and a chance to create memories with my grandchildren before they grew too old to care about spending time with Grandma. First-class seats, an oceanfront villa, on Maui snorkeling trips, and sunset dinners I had carefully budgeted using my points and careful savings. I even bought new walking shoes and a lightweight suitcase in soft coral, the color that always made me feel alive. But standing in that line at Chicago O'Hare watching Vanessa casually drop the torn pieces of my passport into a nearby trash bin, I understood the truth. To them I wasn't family, I was staff. And staff doesn't get vacations. "You'll be fine," Vanessa continued, flipping her highlighted hair. "The cats need their special wet food twice a day, and the litter boxes have to be scooped religiously. You know how Princess gets if her routine is off. Derek and I need this break. Emily agrees, don't you?" Emily murmured something that might have been agreement, her eyes fixed on the floor. She had always been caught between loyalties, but lately the pull toward her stepsister's lifestyle had grown stronger. Derek just smirked, checking his Rolex, the one I'd helped finance when his business ventures kept failing. The agent at the counter called the next group forward. My family moved ahead without me chatting excitedly about luau's and poolside cocktails, as if I had already disappeared. The humiliation burned hot up my neck, but beneath it something colder was forming, something precise and familiar. The same calm I used to feel in audit rooms when I caught executives cooking the books. I had spent decades as a senior corporate accountant for a Fortune 500 company. I knew numbers, I knew contracts, and most importantly, I knew exactly whose name was on every major financial thread, holding their comfortable lives together. Vanessa glanced back, once expecting me to shuffle away obediently toward the exit. Instead, I turned in the opposite direction, wheeling my coral suitcase behind me with steady clicks against the polished floor. The wheels sounded like determination. I didn't need to make a scene. Scenes were for people who still cared about being liked. I had moved past that years ago. What I needed now was control. As I walked toward the customer service counter, the weight of decades of quiet enabling settled on my shoulders. Every time I had said yes when I should have said no, every check I wrote to help the kids, every vacation I funded while they complained about my cooking or my outdated opinions. It all crystallized in that moment. The young woman at the service desk looked up with a polite smile. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" I placed my planner on the counter and opened it to the page with every confirmation number, reservation code, and credit card detail neatly noted in my precise handwriting. My voice came out steady, professional, the same tone I once used to negotiate million-dollar contracts. "I need to cancel an entire family reservation," I said. It's under my name and my card. All 5 tickets, the villa, the excursions, everything." She blinked, glancing toward the check-in line where my family was now almost at the front. The whole party. "Are you sure I looked back one last time?" Derek was laughing at something on his phone. Vanessa was posing for a selfie with the grandchildren. Emily stood slightly apart, biting her lip. "Yes," I replied, turning back to the agent. "I'm quite sure." As her fingers began typing, I felt the first real shift inside my chest. Not rage, not even sadness anymore. Just clarity. Cold, administrative, unstoppable clarity. They thought they could tear up my future and leave me behind with 2 spoiled cats. They had no idea I was about to tear up theirs. The customer service agent's keyboard clicked steadily, while I stood there, my coral suitcase resting against my leg like a quiet ally. Outside the tall windows, planes taxied down the runway, their lights blinking against the gray Chicago sky. I watched my family through the glass partition as they reached the counter, Vanessa gesturing dramatically, Derek flashing that confident grin he reserved for service workers. Emily kept glancing over her shoulder, but she never stepped away from them. In that moment, something inside me clicked into place with the same precision I once applied to balance sheets that didn't add up. I wasn't devastated. I was awake. For 7 years I had played the role of the gracious widow, the reliable grandmother, the one who never said no. After Richard died, I told myself that supporting the family was a way to honor his memory. His daughter Vanessa had moved back into our lives like she belonged there, bringing Derek and their 2 children. My own daughter Emily, always the peacemaker, welcomed the blended chaos. And I funded it all. The mortgage assistance that became permanent. The new SUV when Derek's startup collapsed. Private school tuition so the grandchildren wouldn't fall behind. Countless vacations, including this one I had meticulously planned and paid for with my retirement accounts and careful investments. I had treated their lifestyle like a company I managed, quietly covering shortfalls while they enjoyed the dividends. But passports don't lie. Torn paper doesn't lie. The casual way Vanessa discarded my documents in a public trash bin told me everything I needed to know about how they truly saw me. "Ma'am," the agent said gently, "the cancellation is processing. Full refund to your primary card since you're the cardholder, and it's more than 24 hours before departure. Would you like me to confirm the resort and activities as well?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "Everything tied to my booking. Leave nothing active." I signed the necessary forms with a steady hand. The agent looked at me with a mix of surprise and quiet respect. Perhaps she had seen this story before older women quietly erased from their own plans. As I walked away from the counter, the terminal noise faded into a low hum. The smell of cinnamon pretzels mixed with jet fuel drifting in from the gates. My new walking shoes, chosen specifically for Hawaiian trails, felt solid on the polished floor. I pulled my leather planner closer to my chest, its worn cover familiar and grounding. This wasn't just about a canceled trip. This was about years of unspoken transactions. Every time I bit my tongue when Vanessa criticized my old-fashioned ways. Every holiday dinner where I cooked for 12 while they scrolled their phones. Every late-night transfer when Derek's gambling investments went south. I had mistaken financial support for love, and they had mistaken my generosity for weakness. I found a quiet corner near a window overlooking the tarmac and sat down. My knees ached slightly from standing so long, but the discomfort felt distant. I opened my planner to a fresh page and began writing in the neat, slanted script that had once closed major deals. They believed I would simply go home, feed the cats, water the plants, and wait for their return with souvenirs and stories that never included me. Vanessa had even texted me the feeding schedule the night before, complete with emojis, as if instructing a hired sitter. I closed the planner and exhaled slowly. The woman who had spent 30 years rising through corporate finance, spotting discrepancies, restructuring failing divisions, protecting shareholder value, had been sleeping on the job when it came to her own life. No more. I stood up, smoothed my travel blazer, and walked toward the terminal exit. Outside, the damp spring air hit my face, carrying the promise of rain. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver the address of a quiet, upscale hotel near the airport that I had stayed at years ago for business. Not the cheapest option, not this time. As the city blurred past the window, I let my mind work the way it always had when facing a failing portfolio. First, secure the assets. Second, cut off unauthorized spending. Third, restructure the entire operation with new terms. This wasn't revenge. This was corrective action. By the time the taxi pulled up to the hotel's covered entrance, I felt lighter. The doorman took my suitcase with a polite nod. The lobby smelled of fresh lilies and lemon polish. I checked into a corner suite on the 14th floor, paying with the same card that had funded their first-class dreams. Alone in the elegant room, I kicked off my shoes and stood at the large window overlooking the airport. Somewhere out there, my family was probably boarding, convinced I was on my way back to their house to serve as unpaid pet sitter. I poured a glass of water from the minibar and sat at the desk. My planner lay open before me. I wrote 3 words at the top of a new page, new terms. Then I began listing every account, every asset, every monthly obligation tied to my name. The house equity line I co-signed, the vehicles with titles still in my possession, the credit cards, the utility accounts, the trust I had quietly set up years ago to protect my retirement. They had torn my passport. I was about to rewrite the entire contract. A calm, almost surgical focus settled over me. No tears, no dramatic vows. Just the steady calculation of a woman who had spent a lifetime making sure numbers told the truth. I picked up my phone, found the contact for my longtime private banker, and dialed. When he answered, my voice was clear and professional. "David, it's Maggie Thompson. I need to make some urgent changes to several accounts." Outside, another plane lifted into the sky. I watched it disappear into the clouds and felt no regret. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment I finally became the author again. The hotel suite smelled of crisp linen and subtle citrus from the diffuser on the nightstand. Late afternoon light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished oak desk where I had spread out my planner. I sat with perfect posture, the same way I once led quarterly reviews. No shaking hands, no second-guessing, just execution. David, my private banker of 18 years, listened without interruption as I explained the situation. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "Maggie, are you certain about the additional cards and the equity line?" "Positive," I replied. "Cancel the supplementary cards immediately, both Vanessa's and Derek's. Flag any recent charges for review. And freeze the home equity line of credit. I want written confirmation within the hour." "Done. I'll handle the notifications personally. The system will show declined transactions within minutes." I thanked him and ended the call. One thread cut. Next was the airline. The same agent I had spoken with earlier confirmed the full cancellation had posted. The first-class seats, the private villa on Maui, the snorkeling excursions, the luau reservations, all of it voided. The refund would appear on my primary card within 3 to 5 business days. I pictured Vanessa's face when the agent at their gate delivered the news. The thought brought no pleasure, only a quiet sense of restored order. I moved to the minibar and poured a small bottle of sparkling water into a crystal glass. The bubbles rose steadily, much like the plan forming in my mind. I opened my planner to the asset page and began making calls with the efficiency of a woman who had once managed 9-figure budgets. The car came first. Derek's sleek black SUV, the one he loved to parade around town, was still registered in my name. I had never transferred the title, a detail he conveniently ignored. I contacted the dealership's finance manager, whom I knew from years of doing business with them. Within 20 minutes, the vehicle was flagged as repossessed at my request. A tow service was dispatched to the long-term airport parking lot where Derek had left it. "Ma'am, we'll have it secured in our holding facility by this evening," the manager assured me. "Good. Notify me when it's done." The cats were next. Princess and Duke Vanessa's precious Siamese pair weren't going to be my problem. I called an exclusive pet resort on the North Shore that I had used before for my own late cat. They agreed to send a transport van to the house within the hour. I authorized a full month of VIP boarding, grooming, and veterinary checkups billed directly to my card. The instructions were clear: release only to me with photo ID, no exceptions. By the time I hung up, the sun had dipped lower, painting the room in warm amber tones. I walked to the window and watched planes take off in steady succession. Somewhere up there, if they had managed to get on another flight, my family was learning that money doesn't flow when the source decides to close the valve. I returned to the desk and continued. Internet and cable provider suspended effective immediately. Lawn service canceled. House cleaner who came twice a week politely informed that her services would no longer be required. Each call was brief, professional, and final. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. These were my accounts, my signatures, my financial decisions. The last call of the afternoon was to the utility company. The central air conditioning unit had a separate meter installed years ago when I helped finance the home renovation. I requested an immediate suspension of that meter. The main power and refrigerator would remain on, but the luxury of constant cool air in this unusually warm spring would be gone by nightfall. Understood, Mrs. Thompson, the representative said after verifying my identity 3 times. Service adjustment completed. I set the phone down and leaned back in the ergonomic chair. My shoulders felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't managing their chaos. I was simply no longer subsidizing it. A soft knock at the door announced room service. I had ordered a grilled salmon salad and a glass of chilled Chardonnay. The waiter rolled the cart in quietly, arranging everything with care. I signed the check and added a generous tip, then sat by the window to eat. The fish was perfectly seared, the greens crisp. Outside the airport continued its endless rhythm of arrivals and departures. My phone began vibrating shortly after 7. First came texts from Emily, concerned, confused. Then a string of increasingly angry messages from Vanessa. Derek tried calling twice. I let them all go to voicemail. The silence on my end was deliberate. Let them sit with the consequences for a while. At 8:30, I finally answered a call from Vanessa. Her voice was shrill, echoing slightly against what sounded like a bathroom stall. What the hell did you do, Maggie? They canceled our entire reservation. The agent said it was the cardholder's decision. We're stuck here with the kids. I took a slow sip of wine, letting the silence stretch just long enough. I canceled the trip I planned and paid for, I said evenly. Since I wasn't invited, it seemed only fair. You can't do this. The kids were so excited. Interesting, I interrupted calmly. You seemed perfectly fine excluding me from the excitement this morning. How are the cats, by the way? I arranged professional boarding for them. They'll be well cared for. I heard Derek swearing in the background. Vanessa's breathing grew sharper. This is insane. You're punishing the whole family because you're offended. No, Vanessa. I'm simply no longer financing disrespect. There's a difference. I ended the call without waiting for a reply. The phone immediately lit up again. I powered it down, enjoying the sudden quiet of the suite. Standing at the window once more, I watched the city lights flicker on across the horizon. My reflection stared back at me, poised, composed, and completely in control. The woman who had quietly enabled years of entitlement had stepped aside. In her place was the seasoned executive who knew exactly how to protect her own interests. Tomorrow the real work would begin. Lawyers, documents, clear boundaries. But tonight in this quiet suite high above the airport, I allowed myself one small, satisfied breath. They had left me standing in the check-in line with a torn passport. I had just rewritten the entire itinerary. The next morning arrived with soft gray light filtering through the hotel curtains. I woke early as always and ordered coffee and fresh fruit to the room. The suite felt spacious and quiet, no barking dogs, no endless television noise, no passive-aggressive comments about my generation, just the low hum of the city far below. I opened my planner at the desk and reviewed the list from the night before. Several items were already crossed off with neat black lines. By 9 o'clock I had spoken again with the pet resort. Princess and Duke had arrived safely and were settled in a private suite with views of the grounds. The manager assured me they were adjusting well. I felt no guilt. They would receive better care than they had in months. I spent the rest of the morning handling the remaining threads. The cable and internet provider confirmed full suspension. The lawn service company agreed to pause indefinitely. The cleaning service was politely terminated with 2 weeks' severance paid from my personal account. Each conversation was brief and professional. I wasn't being cruel. I was simply refusing to continue paying for a lifestyle that treated me as disposable. Around noon, my phone, now turned back on, began lighting up in earnest. I let it ring while I finished my coffee. Finally, I answered Emily's call. "Mom," she said, her voice tight with exhaustion. "We just got home. The house is—" What happened? "The air conditioning isn't working, the Wi-Fi is gone, and Derek's car is missing from the airport parking. Vanessa is losing her mind." I walked to the window looking out over the city. The glass felt cool beneath my fingertips. "I'm taking care of my own affairs, Emily. The trip was canceled because I wasn't welcome on it. The supporting services I've been funding are also being adjusted." A long pause. In the background, I could hear one of the grandchildren crying, and Derek's raised voice arguing with someone on another line. "Mom, this is extreme," Emily whispered. "Derek says you repossessed the car. His name is on the insurance." "His name is on nothing that matters," I replied calmly. "The title is in mine. It always has been. And the equity line on the house. That's paused too. I suggest you all sit down and have an honest conversation about how you've been living." Vanessa grabbed the phone then. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "You crazy old woman! You boarded my cats. You had them taken from my house. I'm calling the police." I took a slow breath, keeping my tone even. "The cats are safe and receiving excellent care at a facility I'm paying for. You're welcome to visit them during designated hours with proper identification. As for the police, they'll explain this is a civil matter involving assets I own or control. I'd suggest saving your energy." Derek's voice boomed in the background. "Tell her we're coming to the hotel. She can't hide forever." I almost smiled. "I'm not hiding, Derek. I'm at the airport Marriott room 1428. But I wouldn't recommend coming. The hotel security has been notified and I have no interest in theatrics. If you want to discuss terms like adults, we can schedule a meeting with my attorney tomorrow morning." The line went quiet for a moment before Vanessa hissed, "You're going to regret this." "I already regret the last 7 years," I said softly. "We'll talk tomorrow at 10. Richard Harlan's office. Be on time." I ended the call and set the phone down. My hands were steady. The old Maggie, the one who would have apologized just to keep the peace, had finally stepped back. In her place was the woman who once stared down auditors and protected millions in company assets. This was no different. Only the stakes were more personal. The rest of the afternoon passed in quiet preparation. I reviewed documents Richard had prepared years ago, the promissory notes on the house, the revocable trust that named me as primary trustee, the careful records of every transfer I had made. I wasn't destroying their lives. I was simply removing the safety net they had mistaken for a right. That evening I treated myself to dinner in the hotel restaurant. Seared scallops, asparagus, and a glass of crisp white wine. The waiter was attentive, the lighting soft. For the first time in years, I ate slowly, tasting every bite without calculating how many people I could have fed at home for the same price. My phone stayed mostly silent after that initial storm, except for a single text from Emily late that night. "I'm scared, Mom. Everything is falling apart." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Sometimes things have to fall apart so they can be put back together properly. Sleep tonight. Tomorrow we start fixing what's broken. I turned off the lights and lay in the large, comfortable bed. The city hummed faintly outside. No cats demanding attention. No tension thick enough to taste. Just the steady rhythm of my own breathing. They had left me at the airport with torn documents and instructions to watch their pets. Now their entire house of cards was feeling the wind. Tomorrow in the lawyer's office they would learn exactly how thoroughly I had documented their disrespect, and I would learn whether any of them were willing to change. I closed my eyes, calm and resolved. The siege had only just begun. The law office of Richard Harlan smelled of aged leather, fresh coffee, and polished wood. Morning light streamed through the tall windows of the conference room, catching dust motes in the air. I arrived early, dressed in a tailored navy pantsuit and my signature pearl earrings. My leather planner sat closed on the mahogany table like a trusted witness. Richard, my attorney for nearly 2 decades, reviewed the documents one final time, his expression calm and focused. "They're here," his assistant announced quietly. Vanessa entered first, her designer bag clutched tightly, followed by Derek in wrinkled clothes that suggested a sleepless night. Emily came last, looking pale and drawn, her eyes darting between us. The grandchildren were safely with a sitter. The air thickened the moment the door closed. Richard didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We're here to discuss the financial and legal arrangements Mrs. Thompson has maintained for this family. Let's be clear from the start, this is not a negotiation. This is a presentation of facts." Vanessa's eyes narrowed on me. "This is ridiculous. You're trying to destroy us over one vacation." I met her gaze steadily. "I'm correcting 7 years of imbalance. Shall we begin?" Richard slid copies of the documents across the table. The first was the promissory note on the house. Vanessa and Derek stared at the pages, their faces shifting from anger to disbelief as Richard explained in his measured baritone. "The home you live in was purchased with significant financial assistance from Maggie. What you believed was a gift was actually a loan secured by a recorded lien. The equity line of credit is in her name. Monthly support vehicle titles and numerous transfers were all documented. The revocable trust she established further protects her interests." Derek slammed his hand on the table. "This is bullshit. You can't just take our house." "I'm not taking anything," I said quietly. "I'm simply no longer giving." The note becomes due upon evidence of ingratitude or financial irresponsibility. Tearing up my passport in public and abandoning me at the airport qualifies. Emily's hands trembled as she flipped through the papers. "Mom, I didn't know it was like this." "You didn't want to know," I replied gently but firmly. "You saw the money flowing and chose comfort over questions." Vanessa's voice rose sharply. "You're a bitter old woman who can't stand seeing us happy." "Derek, tell her we'll fight this." Richard raised a hand. "You're welcome to try. But the documentation is ironclad. Maggie has also revoked the power of attorney Derek was given years ago for convenience. Any further attempts to access her accounts will be considered unauthorized and reported." The room grew tense. Derek leaned forward, his face flushed. "You think you can just cut us off? We have kids. This is elder abuse or something. We'll sue." I allowed myself a small, dry smile. Elder abuse? Interesting accusation from people who left an elderly widow at the airport to watch their cats while vacationing on her dime. I have airport security footage, timestamps, and multiple witnesses. I'd be careful throwing around legal terms. Emily suddenly spoke, her voice cracking but clearer than I had heard in years. "Stop, both of you!" She looked at Vanessa and Derek, then turned to me. "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have said something yesterday. I should have said something years ago." Vanessa whirled on her. "Don't you dare side with her. She's manipulating you." "No," Emily said, straightening her shoulders. "She's been carrying us. And we've let her. I'm tired of pretending everything is fine while we treat her like an inconvenience." The silence that followed was heavy. Derek muttered curses under his breath. Vanessa's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palms. I watched them both, feeling neither triumph nor pity, just the quiet satisfaction of truth finally occupying the room. Richard cleared his throat. "Here are the immediate terms. The house remains under the lien. Maggie will provide a structured monthly allowance for essentials, and the children manage through a joint account with Emily. Derek's access to any financial instruments is terminated. The vehicle will be returned only after full discussion of repayment terms. And the cats will be released to Vanessa once she demonstrates stable housing arrangements." Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. "This isn't over. I'll take the kids. You'll never see them again." I remained seated, my voice low and controlled. "Threatening me with my grandchildren is a mistake, Vanessa. The trust includes provisions for their education and welfare, provisions I control. Try to alienate them from me, and you'll discover how quickly a custody evaluation can turn." Emily stepped between them. "Enough. I'm staying with Mom on this. The kids need stability, not whatever chaos you're about to create." Derek grabbed Vanessa's arm. "We're leaving. We don't have to listen to this." As they stormed toward the door, Richard spoke one last time. "Any attempt to remove assets or harass Mrs. Thompson will result in immediate legal action. Good day." The door slammed behind them. The sudden quiet settled like a blanket. Emily sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. I reached over and rested my hand on her shoulder, feeling the tension there. "It hurts now," I said softly. But staying silent hurt more for longer. She looked up at me, eyes red but clearer. "I don't know how to fix this." "One day at a time," I replied, starting with honesty and boundaries. Richard nodded respectfully as he gathered the papers. "You handled that with remarkable composure, Maggie." I stood, smoothing my jacket. The weight I had carried for years felt noticeably lighter. Outside the windows, the city moved on with its usual rhythm. Inside, a long overdue reckoning had finally taken place. They had torn my documents and tried to leave me behind. Now the contracts that once bound us were being rewritten on my terms. 3 months had passed since that tense morning in Richard Harlan's conference room. The Chicago summer had settled in thick and humid, but inside my new downtown apartment the air remained cool and quiet. I had sold the old family house I once shared with Richard and moved into a bright, modern 2-bedroom unit with a small balcony overlooking the river. It was the first space in years that felt entirely mine. Emily arrived at my door on a Thursday evening carrying a modest grocery bag. She looked different, leaner, more tired but steadier. Her hair was pulled back simply, and she wore practical flats instead of the heels Vanessa used to encourage. "Hi, Mom," she said, offering a small smile as I let her in. The scent of fresh basil and tomatoes followed her from the bag. "I brought ingredients. Thought I'd cook for us tonight if that's okay." I nodded, watching as she moved around my kitchen with a new kind of purpose. Over dinner, simple grilled chicken and a salad, she prepared herself. We talked about the changes. I got the job, she told me, pride flickering in her eyes. Part-time administrative assistant at the medical center. "It's not glamorous, but the pay covers my gas and groceries. I'm sticking to the budget you helped me set up." I poured us both iced tea. "And the therapy. 2 a month so far. It's hard admitting how much I enabled everything. But Dr. Ellis says I'm making progress on setting boundaries." She paused, fork hovering over her plate. "Derek moved out 2 weeks ago. He's staying with a friend in the suburbs." Vanessa's furious, of course. She keeps texting me about how I betrayed her. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand briefly. "You didn't betray her. You chose yourself and your children. That's different." The monthly allowance I provided was modest but structured. It covered rent on the house, utilities, and essentials for the grandchildren. Anything beyond that had to come from Emily's earnings or careful planning. We reviewed expenses together every 4th Sunday. No surprises, no bailouts. Derek had tried to push back at first. There were angry voicemails and one awkward confrontation in the driveway when he came to collect more of his things. I simply reminded him of the promissory note and the revoked access to my accounts. After Richard sent a firmly worded letter outlining potential legal consequences, the noise quieted. He still saw the children every other weekend under supervised terms, but the entitled roar had diminished to a sullen grumble. Later that evening, after Emily left, I stepped onto my balcony. The river glittered with city lights. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of blooming jasmine from the planters I had arranged along the railing. For the first time in years, my calendar belonged to me. I had taken a solo trip to Sedona the previous month, red rocks and quiet trails that healed something deep inside. Next month I planned a week in Vancouver with 2 old colleagues from my corporate days. No guilt. No one to answer to. The grandchildren were adjusting too. Last weekend, when they stayed over, 8-year-old Sophie asked why Grandma's house felt calmer now. I told her the truth in simple terms. Sometimes grown-ups have to learn how to take care of their own problems so everyone can be happier in the end. They were learning the value of earned things. We started a small savings jar for their future activities. No more automatic yeses. Consequences and effort became part of their routine, just as they should have been all along. I returned inside and opened my leather planner on the dining table. The pages that once overflowed with other people's emergencies now held my own quiet victories: yoga classes 3 times a week, book club every other Tuesday, and careful investment reviews that kept my retirement secure. The numbers looked healthy. More importantly, so did I. Vanessa still tried occasional indirect attacks through the children or social media hints, But her influence had shrunk. Without financial leverage or Emily's silent compliance, her tantrums landed in empty space. I no longer engaged. Silence, I had learned, was its own powerful response. Emily was slowly reclaiming her strength. She no longer jumped at every demand from her stepsister. She was teaching her children that love doesn't mean endless sacrifice without respect. Watching that transformation was more satisfying than any tropical vacation could have been. As I prepared for bed that night, I stood in front of the mirror brushing my hair. The woman looking back had silver strands woven through dark waves and lines around her eyes earned from decades of real life, but her posture was straight and her gaze clear. I had not destroyed a family. I had stopped participating in its slow erosion. By refusing to finance disrespect, I had created space for something healthier to grow. Tomorrow, Emily and I would meet again to go over next month's budget. After that, I had tickets to a symphony performance downtown, a solo evening dressed up surrounded by music I loved. The old contracts had been rewritten. The new ones had clear terms, mutual respect, and firm boundaries. And for the first time in a long while, I was living according to them. 6 months had slipped by since that chaotic morning at O'Hare Airport. The leaves had turned and fallen, and a crisp Chicago winter had settled over the city. I sat on the sunlit porch of the house that once belonged to all of us, now legally restructured under clearer terms. A soft wool blanket covered my lap, and my leather planner rested beside me, its pages filled with new entries rather than emergency fixes. The air carried the faint scent of pine from the wreath Emily had hung on the front door. The house felt different now, lighter, honest. Emily stepped out carrying 2 mugs of hot coffee, her steps more confident than they had been in years. She had taken on full-time hours at the medical center and was managing the household with a quiet determination I hadn't seen since she was a young woman. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, replaced by a steady glow of self-respect. "Here you go, Mom. Extra cream just how you like it," she said, handing me a mug before settling into the chair across from me. The grandchildren's laughter drifted from inside where they were building a blanket fort in the living room. I took a sip, savoring the warmth. How was the parent-teacher conference? Emily smiled, a real one that reached her eyes. Sophie's teacher said she's thriving. She actually raised her hand in class this week without being prompted. And Lucas is learning that actions have consequences. No more last-minute rescues from Grandma's wallet. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the pale winter sunlight filter through the bare branches. The central air was off. We had adjusted to layers and space heaters when needed. The cable package was basic now. The lawn was mowed by Emily and the kids on weekends. Small things, but each one represented ownership. "Derek called yesterday," Emily said quietly. "He's working construction. Pays better than his old schemes, and he's on time for visits now. No more big promises he can't keep." I nodded, and Vanessa, still angry. But she's stopped the daily texts. She finally picked up the cats last month. I think reality is starting to sink in for her too. I didn't feel triumphant, only a deep, quiet relief. I hadn't wanted to break anyone. I had simply stopped letting them break me. The children burst onto the porch, then cheeks flushed from their game. Sophie climbed into my lap while Lucas showed me a drawing he had made at school. Their energy was the same, but something had shifted. They asked before assuming. They said thank you without being reminded. Small changes, but meaningful ones. Grandma Sophie asked, looking up at me with serious eyes, "Are we still saving for that trip?" I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "We are. But we'll go when your mom can help pay for it and I can pay for mine. No more torn tickets or last-minute exclusions. We travel as a family that respects each other." Emily met my gaze over their heads and we shared a look of understanding. She was rebuilding her life on firmer ground, and I was finally free to live mine without carrying the weight of everyone else's choices. Later that afternoon, after the children went inside, I walked through the garden I had once tended alone. The flower beds were simpler now, but cared for by hands that lived here. I thought about the woman I had been that day at the airport, standing stunned while my passport was torn and my place in the family discarded like an inconvenience. That woman died in that terminal. In her place stood someone who understood her worth wasn't measured by how much she could give, but by the respect she demanded in return. I had not lost my family. I had redefined it. Boundaries weren't walls. They were fences with gates that only opened for those willing to walk through them honorably. My retirement was secure. My days were filled with books, symphony nights, long walks by the lake, and time with friends who valued my company, not my checkbook. As the sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, I felt a profound sense of peace. At 64, life hadn't ended. It had finally begun on my own terms. Emily joined me again, slipping her arm through mine. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for the money or the house, for refusing to let us stay broken." I squeezed her arm gently. We fix what we love even when it's painful, especially then. This was my new normal. Not perfect, but real. A family learning to stand on its own feet. A woman who had finally chosen herself without apology. And a future that belonged fully to me. If you've ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most, I hope this story reminds you that it's never too late to rewrite the terms. Your peace, your dignity, and your future are worth protecting. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for them is to stop financing disrespect. I'd love to know how this story landed with you. Have you ever had to set hard boundaries with family? What happened? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're watching from somewhere warm and peaceful today, drop a hello and tell me where you are. We have many more stories like this, realistic, powerful journeys of women reclaiming their lives. If you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss when a new one drops. Your support keeps these stories coming. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, protect your peace. It's the most valuable asset you own.